One day, when Ben Franklin was a blundering youth, an old Quaker friend took him aside and lashed him with a few stinging truths, something like this. Ben, you're impossible. Your opinions have a slap in them for everyone who differs with you. They become so offensive that nobody cares for them. Your friends find they enjoy themselves better when you're not around. You know so much that no man can tell you anything. So you're not likely to ever know anything more than you do right now, which is very little. So Ben Franklin says, I made a rule to forbear all direct contradiction to sentiment of others and positive assertion of my own. I even forbade myself the use of language that imported a fixed opinion, such as certainly or undoubtedly, etc. And I adopted instead of them, I conceive, or I apprehend, or I imagine a thing to be so, or it appears to me at the present. When another asserted something that I thought was an error, I denied myself the pleasure of contradicting him abruptly. And in answering, I began by observing that in certain cases or circumstances, his opinion would be right. But in the present case, there seemed to be some difference, etc. I soon found the conversation I engaged in went on much more pleasantly. I had less mortification when I found to be in the wrong, and more easily I prevailed when I was with others to give up their mistakes and enjoy them with me when I happened to be in the right. And in this mode, which I first put on with some violence to my natural inclination, became so easy and so habitual to me that perhaps these past 50 years, no one has ever heard a dogmatical expression escape me. And to this habit, after my character of integrity, I think it's principally owing that I had earned so much weight with my fellow citizens when I proposed new institutions or alterations in the old, and so much influence in public councils when I became a member, for I was a bad speaker, never eloquent, subject to much hesitation in my choice of words, hardly correct in language, and yet I generally carried my points. Let's sing opening hymn number 146. Soon the day will arrive. Okay, now we have the story for all ages. The children would like to come up.
And sit properly, please. No. Properly.
Well, some of you already heard, this is my favorite book, right? So I had to find a special one in here for today's topic, and it's a short story, one page, a little bit of reading, but I'm on?
There we go.
You're on. Oh, I'm on. Well, okay. It's magic, the magic box. Okay, good. So this is a super old story, and let's not crinkle the page. The Raggedy Man. Oh, the Raggedy Man, he works for Pa, and he's the goodest man you ever saw. He comes to our house every day. He waters the horses and feeds them hay, and he opens the shed, and we always laugh when he drives out our little old wobbly calf. And then, our high girl says he can. He milks the cow for Elizabeth Ann. Ain't he an awful good Raggedy Man? Raggedy, raggedy, raggedy. Why, that raggedy man, he is so good. He splits the kindling and chops the wood. And then he spades in our garden too. And he does most things that boys can't do. He climbed clean up an arbor tree and shook an apple down for me. Another one too for Elizabeth Ann. And another one too for the raggedy man. Ain't he an awful kind raggedy man? Raggedy, raggedy, raggedy man. And the raggedy man, he knows most rhymes. And he tells them if I do good sometimes. He knows about giants and griffins and elves, and the squidgicum squeezes that swallows themselves right by the hump in the hole in the pasture lot. He showed me a hole that the lynx has got, and it goes way deep in the ground, and can turn into me or Elizabeth Ann. Ain't he a funny old raggedy man? Raggedy, raggedy, raggedy man. The raggedy man. One time when he was making a little bow and arrow for me, he says, "You're big like your pa is. Are you going to keep a fine store like his? Be a rich merchant and wear fine clothes? Or what are you going to be, goodness knows?" And then he laughed at Elizabeth Ann. And I says, "I'm going to be a raggedy man. I'm going to just be a nice raggedy man. Raggedy, raggedy, raggedy man." So, how old do you think the boy is? How old? 7 or, yeah, maybe so. And what about the raggedy man? How? Older than what? Oh, could be, yeah. And why do you think the boy likes the raggedy man so much? Okay. What kinds of things does he admire about the raggedy man? He's what? He's funny. Mm-hmm. Okay. What else? Maybe the raggedy man has things that the little boy doesn't have yet. Oh, yeah? What else? This boy is, he's kind of little. The raggedy man is, he's big and strong, right? He can do all kinds of things that boys can't do. Yeah. So maybe he's looking forward to learning how to do some of the things that the raggedy man knows. Anything else that he likes?
He likes being outdoors.
He likes being outdoors. He likes the dog, yeah? Yeah. Milks the cow. So he's a hard worker. Mm-hmm. Now what about the raggedy man? What does he think about the boy? He's what? He's small. Mm-hmm. Kind. Mm-hmm. Funny. Well, these are the kinds of things we're going to talk about in our series today while you guys are doing our read. We'll have probably the same kind of list going on. What kinds of things we admire in people that are different than us. And maybe things we can share. So, okay, so our turn. About 15 years ago, I was home from Massachusetts. I was happy my friend from graduate school had invited Kennedy to dinner in New York City. And this guy, Steve, really likes nice restaurants. And we were excited to see him, but it was clear we were going to be having a beautiful evening with him, and we had to drive into the city to do that, because he stays there when he comes to visit from Michigan. And so after a fantastic evening, it was a little rainy and cold, not this beautiful weather we're having now, but not so nice outside, and quite late. And as we were walking, underneath all the scaffolding and stuff they have over the sidewalks in New York, some places, there was a man on the sidewalk. He was sitting on a piece of cardboard, and he was crying. And I could not think of anything to do. So we had a short conversation about that. We walked onto the parking lot, got in our Lexus, and drove 50 miles home. And the following Sunday, I went to Unitarian Fellowship where we belonged, and I said that this was my concern, was that this had happened. I was concerned that the man was crying, but I was equally concerned that I couldn't think of anything to do. Since then, I've learned quite a lot about disparities in different communities, and I was very appreciative to have the opportunity to work in the implementation of a poverty initiative, a national poverty initiative. Its implementation in Sussex County. It was called Circles. And of the 80-some communities that are operating in a Circles program, I would ask myself why so many of those would do well that had small faith-based initiatives. Similarly, once I started to learn about the Business Alliance for Local Living Economies, I found the same kind of question entering my mind. Why these small Main Street towns, why these small communities who decided to take back their identity and really foster their local initiatives, why they were so successful. There are more than a handful of them, perhaps 50 in the United States. And I can tell you that domestically, this impact is not due to an infusion of external dollars. Internationally, though, we are often hear statements from, let's say, someone like Jan Egeland from the UN, in a time of terrible disaster like the tsunamis, that governments should be giving a lot more money for disaster relief and aid. And that is certainly true. But what strikes me is that people, individuals in their communities, can give 10 times more than money in other resources, which depend on knowing what resources you can give person to person. And because of the nature of human relationship, passing these things on are possible. It's apparent to me now that the poor are not only across the globe, they are, in fact, across the street. So my talk today is called Forget Global. If you really want to make a difference, just know your neighbor. Now, before I start, let me say that this is not so much about helping others in the sense of charity. It's about sharing. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you about 11 stories, maybe only 10 stories, we'll see how much time we have, about conserving resources in our local community. As we illustrate the role of each of the resources, we'll talk in terms of the relative health of those resources, and that's why I brought this nifty, super low-tech chart with me. These are at our disposal. And you see, these are the resources here. I'll be talking about these. And then let's say an individual person who's assessing their resources or a collection of people that want to assess resources in their community can give this kind of sliding scale of grading system, which goes from crisis or at risk or stable, safe or secure, and then thriving or giving back. And one of the things I wanted to point out in this grid is that in any resource assessment, none of us has everything in crisis, and none of us has everything in the completely wonderful, safe, secure, giving back column. So one of the characteristics of this exercise is that when you do it, and I did this as part of the class, which is called, the class that we gave in the Poverty Initiative is called Getting Ahead in a Just Getting By World, was the tool we used. It's written by Phil DeGaulle, who I'm pleased to have known in terms of training and projects and things. So this is the basis for the work, and actually there's a copy of this that belongs to the fellowship, so anyone can look at it anytime. So I'll just ask as I give you my examples, and they won't be examples where I'm giving, perhaps as much as receiving over time. You might also think of resources that of examples of your own, and if we have time, we can certainly have a discussion about that. We'll be able to share our experience and ideas. Okay, so let's talk about the financial resources first, and just get that out of the way. Financial resources, in terms of this program, is very detailed. It's actually about 16 measures of safe, stable living, affordable housing, having savings, having insurance, having transportation, a lot of things that people in the middle class take for granted. And certainly if you're in the thriving category, you're buying everything locally so that jobs are increased locally and that money multiplies because it's all being conserved in your community. And this is why, one of the key reasons why the two domestic initiatives that I talked about earlier are so effective. They capture everything, and they really make sure that those resources are strong next door. So an example of this might be if you're going to hire folks to insulate your house. You might save money yourself, but you might give a job to someone else, and that guy goes and spends that money at a local restaurant, and the waitress gets paid for that, and she goes and buys other things with the money that stays in the community. Also, trading for work is a way to think about financial resources as well. So it's not, as you can see, it's not about having money in the bank. It's about an attitude about security and all the things that, when we're strong from a financial point of view, would be true. But this is just one of 11 things, just one. Emotional resources. Here we have, I'll define for each one, I'll give you a list of top line definition of each one, and then an example perhaps. Understanding your own thoughts and feelings, and keeping a perspective and attitude, the ability to act based on future rather than the future results rather than in the moment, what's getting under your skin, are the kinds of things that add to emotional resources. resources. So you can see that this example, this is an example of many resources that have like a time component, right? They can come and go. Just if you have it at one point in your life doesn't mean you'll always have it as part of your life. And so I would say that anybody 6 months after losing a job is at a time of very high risk. It's not really, speaking from experience, it's not the day they tell you that you're not going to come to work tomorrow. It's 6 months later, things are very confusing, whether you found a new job or not. It's the ground is not level under your feet while you're sorting things out. So to foster emotional resources, sometimes, you know, for someone that's emotionally healthy, sometimes just lending your ear so someone can talk things through on their own. You know, wow, you have given a resource there. And I certainly do appreciate all those folks that listen to me wailing for more than a year. Okay. So the emotional resources are different from mental resources. And here we start to think a little bit more about ability, but also education and skills. And these would be the things that help you compete for well-paying jobs. It might include the ability to make plans and then carry them out. So if you're able to break things into small enough bites. It's also, I think, important if you want to learn to talk to other people who have learned. I know Ken for a long time has asked other people who are accomplished guitarists, you know, how did you learn this? How did you do that? What does it feel like to, you know, perform in a different, in a different kind of environment? And personally, I find that the first time this happened, I was shocked. A young woman, about 20 years old, asked me how I made it to graduate school because she had just found out that I got married while I was in college. And that's when I smile, because when I'm asked that question, I see that those young women are really planning on how to balance their own significant relationships with their plans for meeting their educational goals. It makes me so happy. Now language, you can see here, I have an example. I have 17 nieces and nephews, so I have age 30 down to going to be born in September? Yeah, actually the bulk of them are, except for the one, they're 30 to 12. So I have some opportunity to assess some of these things. And language skills, having language skills, in this example, language skills in crisis, means that you don't have the language skills to support getting a good, or to keep a good paying job. And sometimes it's just something as simple. It doesn't mean that you're not speaking English, although that can be a reason to be at risk or perhaps not stable if you don't have other resources that support you being in a community that doesn't require you to speak English. But I'm finding now more than two nieces and nephews that I know have difficulty recognizing the kind of language, the casual register that they use for talking with their friends, and the importance of translating or changing that for a job situation, a hiring situation. It's difficult for young people, at least these two that I'm thinking of, to switch between what's cool in one setting is not cool if you're in court or if you're at a job interview. You guys, you know, you get that. to understand the viewpoint of others. Safe and secure means that you can express complex ideas in a variety of settings. So you're translating, whether you're speaking English, you could be bilingual, switching between casual and formal situations. And remember Ben Franklin that we opened with, the little story. As I say, Ben Franklin was functioning at the highest level, using language to debate, persuade, and resolve conflicts. This is a very important standard for our leaders today. I would certainly like to vote for anyone today that can resolve conflicts using language. So, social support. Social support means having positive friends and families and connections, or friends and family that support positive changes. Having social support means that there are no dangerous people in your home or in your community. When I moved to Philly, a long time ago, I was 17. Quite young. I had no money, and my mom didn't either. Yet she felt very strongly that I should go, and that I was safe because Ken's family, many years later to be my husband, was nearby in Delaware. And even though I would say their need to intervene in our lives during the period that we were in college there were pretty infrequent, it was important to just have someone nearby that could smooth out the bumps on occasion. And looking back at that time, fondly sometime, eating popcorn and omelets, surviving the way many college students do, I have to say that if I'd gone to another place, perhaps more isolated, I'm not so sure that I would have succeeded the way that I did. Physical resources. Here we have physical health, mobility, perhaps driving. In Western New Jersey, driving is pretty important. Exercising for the long-term health. Well, we've already heard about the Raggedy Man. Here's the picture of physical resources. A friend of ours also remembers old relatives of Italy who, because they were farming and using hand tools into their later years, were quite strong even in their 80s. This is a little bit different in 21st century America. Driving too, we have had many neighbors, elderly couples, our friends, the Brainies, when one got put into a nursing home after years of being together, the separation was unbearable. And it was easy for us to offer to drive them to see each other. It's such a simple resource. Spiritual resources. Here we have the cultural connection or sense of spiritual purpose that gives us support and guidance. It's the sense that my choices in life make a difference, and that the connectedness enhances practice together, if it's spiritual practice like yours, or tolerance of other religions. I have great friends, Nancy and Jack. Nancy is a very religious Protestant, and Jack is a very religious Catholic. And we quite agree that because of our friendship and the spiritual resources that we each have, that our values transcend not only the differences in our religion, but also differences in our politics. Integrity and trust. Integrity and trust means I do what I say I'm going to do. It means you do what is fair and right for all concerned. It means that you accept responsibility, not blaming others. And this is not something that's a once in a while kind of thing. It has to be consistent every single day. Are you reliable? Are you dependable? The last job that I had in corporate America was a very difficult one. I had taken a position in sharing cloud just after the senior management had been changed. And the senior management had been changed because the previous management had been found to have committed many wrongs. You know, everything from Medicaid fraud, SEC violations, manufacturing discretions. Just about everything that you could do as a corporation was done before the senior management was changed in 2003. And I would say that what I did not realize was that just because there was new management there, that anything was going to change in the eyes of the employees who had been through a very difficult time, and certainly not in my role facing the public as part of the group that worked with patient advocates. It just took years, I would say, before we were trusted. And one of our mantras of the senior management at that time was earn trust every day. And I'm very happy to have had that experience. I had really no idea what it would involve or how long it would take. So, motivation and persistence. Here we have the energy to prepare for and plan and complete projects and jobs and personal change. It means that we can take the longer view. Can you work for a change that doesn't come right away? Perhaps not, because we all know it's easy to lose that perspective if we're just overwhelmed by the sheer size of any job, even something as simple as cleaning out a closet on the weekend. We just look at it and we go, wow, that's just too much. We'll go read a book or do something a little more fun. If you're the kind of person that can break down big jobs into smaller, attainable goals, then this is a terrific resource that you can offer to other people. Not everyone has that skill. Let's just remember a big example was Thomas Edison. He's credited with inventing electricity, but remember, at the time, there were no materials for anything. Not to turn on switches, not to conduct the electricity, no light bulbs, no way to get it from this building to that building or even across the room. And so Thomas Edison evaluated thousands of materials, and he would say that his work was just one part inspiration and very much perspiration. So role models is an important resource. This is access to others who are safe and supportive and nurturing. And it's important to have role models in several areas of life. You need much more than one. It also starts quite early. Almost all of us know our favorite teacher and the impact that they had. For me, it was Mrs. Van Stein in the 8th grade. But my grandparents, when it came time for me to contemplate marriage, became the model that I wanted for myself. And ultimately, when reaching the working world, my thesis advisor, Rappaport, would introduce me to the kind of person I wanted to be in my professional life. And I wrote him a letter saying that this was the case. You know, if I'm admitted to your school, I want to be sure to work for you because of the kinds of things I've heard about, the way you do your training and how your students make it in their jobs. Finally, we come to the knowledge of rules. These are sometimes called hidden rules of economic class. So between poverty middle class, and wealth. And you know, Hollywood loves to make great fun of the differences in class. There are many, many examples, movies, almost all comedies, that highlight the discomfort people have when they're trying to translate from one set of rules to another. A middle-class person who lacks this resource will be in a crisis or most uncomfortable, whether they're spending the night at the home of a person in poverty or just attending a Thanksgiving dinner at the home of a person in wealth. Here the movie White Palace comes to mind. And I would say too that in my experience, writing a formal thank you note would be the way that I could have avoided years of strife with my mother-in-law. Let's say that for 35 years she's done nothing but love me, but I just did not know when I was in college what was expected. So humor aside, the middle-class rules of achievement are what drive the expectations for work and school behavior in our society, and that's why they're important. So if you know those rules and you have some skills to apply them, great. But if not, it's big trouble and it's not funny. So I've covered the 11 resources now, just to review. Financial resources, yes, but 10 others. Emotional, mental, language, social support, physical resources, spiritual resources, integrity and trust, motivation and persistence, role models, and the knowledge of hidden rules of economic class. So I just want to say at the end here that once we realize that poverty and the extremes of economic inequality are a lot more than money, now we can take action. When we recognize that 10 other resources that we have can share and build a better community, this is the way. It's personal attention to these relationships with people that we can access directly, not on Facebook, but in person. Taking stock of the resources we have and identifying those we want to build. Making a support team for the resources that are low, with friends and people we already know. So, while we can and should send humanitarian disaster relief to people around the world when horrible tragedies strike, it's only here that we can lend an ear or share a skill or prepare for an interview, or drive a patient, or see or be a role model. This is how we can take action. For a better life, a better job, a happier community, we can be here when we know our neighbors. I hope we get a little chance to have a discussion of your experience as well.